Good evening. My name is Salman H. I am an American Palestinian born in Kuwait, and my father was actually an engineer who, after he finished his studies, went to work in Kuwait. So, Dr. Salman, when I was reading your book, it brought so many personal memories. I would like to begin by really thanking the American Palestinian Women's Association for putting together this event. And please, whoever is joining, please make sure you are muting your mics. And I want to thank Muna Jarrah because she is the head of the book club and she's the brains behind this event. She and Muna Sadiq and Dr. Leila Hunaidi, they're the ones who really decided to make this event happen. What we're going to do today is I am going to introduce Dr. Salman and maybe ask a question or two. And if you have questions for Dr. Salman, please send them to the chat. And Dr. Leila Hunaidi is going to moderate the question and the answer part. And let me just make sure. Muna Jarrah, you can hear me clearly because I have echo here. Muna? I just want to make sure you can hear me clearly.
Hey, Samar, I can hear you. I have my mic on mute, but I can hear you very clearly, and I can see it. I can see you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, again, we are starting this event and it is being taped. I'm very happy to say that Dr. Salman Abu-Sitta is with us today, and he was born in Al-Ma'in in 1937 in the village of Ma'in, which is the Abu-Sitta spring area in Bir Sheba or in Bir Saba. Dr. Salman is a witness to life in Palestine before the Nakba and during the Nakba. When he was about 13 years old, I think he went to Egypt to finish his studies and schooling. And he was a very smart student and was the first, I think, in the Saadiya school in Egypt. Amazing achievement, mashallah, Doctor. And in Egypt, he went to college and obtained his first degree in engineering. He eventually had a PhD also in engineering from the University of London. Although many of you may have known Dr. Salman for his debates and activities and writings and about a number of books and articles that he has always published. And I'm sure, Doctor, you are also well known as an engineer, but this you did not elaborate a lot about in your book. But Dr. Salman is really most known for mapping and developing a practical plan for implementing the right of return of Palestinian refugees. Actually, if you are online, you can go to www.plands.org or plands.org and see the amazing work that he is doing. We're going to be talking about that, Doctor, maybe in the second half of our meeting today, because I really want to start with your book. Dr. Salman wrote or published in 2016 his book, Mapping My Return. When I started reading your book, Dr. Salman, I really assumed that I will be reading about another biography, another memoir about somebody who was quite young when the Nakba started. And when I was reading the first few chapters, it was really very painful to read, because we are reading it at a time that what you are writing about or what you wrote about in 2016 is actually happening. It did not stop from happening. So it was very painful to read the few first chapters of your book because of the genocide going on in Gaza. And then, of course, when I started going deeper in the book, and I think you mentioned it in the beginning and you talk about it before you went to Egypt, that you have started a life quest. But my initial question, for somebody who is very much interested in my return, in my mom's return, in the return of Palestinians who are living in refugee camps, and Palestinians who live in the diaspora, not the ones in the Western world, but let's say in the Arab world, why did you decide to write your book in English and not in Arabic? If you can unmute your mic.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you, all of you, Ana, Leila. Thank you very much. Thank you, APWA, for inviting me. I'm very pleased to speak to you for many reasons. One of them, of course, is that you have been in Kuwait and you know a lot of things of our background, and therefore you need updating of that. But also because, as you just said, Summer, what's happening today is just a continuation of what we have experienced. It's amazing that when we say a Nakba did not stop, Nakba goes on, we did not realize 6 months ago that it will be seen and the world seen everywhere by everybody in such force and in such savagery. And therefore, our argument or our discussion about Nakba and our situation as refugees has now reached huge dimensions. Now, why did I write it in English? Well, first of all, because I was in London and I was in several places where I was talking and various people in lectures and so on, I thought that we have to tell our story to the West, because the West brought Zionism to us, and we are victims of the West and Zionism. And so it's important for them to know the crime committed against us. There is another reason, actually. My children and my grandchildren, as you know, they speak English well, and I wanted to tell them the story. I wanted to tell them about the life they have not seen, or the life they could have lived in, and they did not have this chance. So it is a record for them to see our life and how we arrived at this position. But there is a question also of why did I write it personally. I come from southern district of Palestine, and if you actually observe the number of memoirs written, I have, for example, in my library, I have 450 books written mostly in Arabic, some in English, by people, Palestinians, describing their experience in Nakba. But the absolute majority of those are from central Palestine and from North Palestine, the Galilee, Yafa, Akka, and so on, and the villages in the middle and the north. So according to Rosemary Sayegh, great historian and writer, she said this is somewhat a unique description of the life in southern Palestine. The other thing which made me do that, when I was doing my PhD at University College London, um, uh, I had a chance, of course, to discover documents about Palestine. You all know, or you heard about, not know, but you heard about how we became refugees. We have been expelled from our homes by a superior force, both in number and quality of weapons and by planning and so on. We were just normal people living in our country, like today's people in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. There is no difference. And suddenly this force came to us with a plan. Of course, it was all brought up and organized by the British. And so when we were expelled, I could speak a little bit about how our family were expelled. We carried with us nothing but our memory. We had no material, we have no, I mean, people left in the middle of the night under the bullets and mortar shells and so on. And so when we left behind our country, we left behind our geography, and we left behind our history, and we left behind our property. And so we have only one thing left, memory and memory. And therefore, we have to record that memory in detail, not by emotions, but also by documentation, which I tried to get over the last 40 years and so on. And so, as you may have read in the book, I was struck by my first experience was while I was doing my PhD at the University of London. I went to Royal Geographical Society and I said, well, let me take this chance because Britain has just left Palestine 10 years earlier. And I wanted to have maps of Palestine and have documentation of Palestine. So I went to Royal Geographical Society and I said, can I please see the maps and documents about Palestine? I said, what? I said, Palestine. I said, we have no such thing. I said, are you sure? I mean, Britain has just left Palestine hurriedly and unceremoniously, only 10 years earlier. So how come you don't have it? Show me a map of the Middle East. And I looked at the map of the Middle East and put my finger there. This is Palestine. I said, aha, you mean Israel? And then I found that all documentation about Palestine has shifted and listed under Israel. So started a long march into documenting, and this is another story, but I started copying all maps and documents and so on. And people will think that in England there is only one place. There are probably half dozen or 2 dozen places where you can find documents of Palestine, and military places, and foreign office, and Commonwealth, and universities, and so on. So let me go back to why we want to document that. Because, as I said, when you have a case, even in court, or world court, or history, you can't just say, I have a country and a home, and I have expelled from it. You have to give documentation. Especially, you are addressing people who say Palestine doesn't exist. There is no Palestine. There are no Palestinians. And of course, this is a farce, because if you look at geography, and if you go from Cairo to Damascus, you have to go through Palestine. Imagine the picture of the Eastern Mediterranean is filled with Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, and then there is a bald spot called Palestine. It's not, it doesn't exist. It doesn't make any sense, and it is an affront on the intelligence of people. So if Palestine doesn't exist, so does Lebanon doesn't exist, or Syria doesn't exist. And now it is rather pathetic that we have tell the West that there is Palestine and there was Palestine, and its history is more well documented than any European country. We have
In 100
maps.
feet, turn right onto England Street. Take the next right onto England Street, then make a U-turn.
Do I hear a voice?
Make a U-turn.
Mo,
Sorry.
please mute your mic. Please, people who are just joining, mute your mics. تفضل, Dr. Salman. Sorry for the interruption.
Anyway, so it was a battle. It's a battle to not only to claim your right in Palestine, to say that you exist. And the biggest lie is really an affront not to us. It's an affront to the Western so-called civilization, which denies a fact. If there is no Palestine, there is no Crusaders, there is no Ottoman, there are no Arabs, there are no Muslims, there is no Jesus Christ, there is no, I mean, it's just amazing how people have been fed so many lies. And I'll tell you in a moment, if we have time, why they have to use so many lies. Because, yeah.
Hopefully we will, Dr. Salman, but what's interesting when we are reading about your life in England and later on in Canada, but mainly in England and dealing with the British, you have developed many lifelong friendship, and you have really so many people helped you. But for us who live in the States to read about the questions and the erasure and the cancellation of our existence, it is very telling that it is exactly what I suffered when I came to the US 34 years ago. And I'm sure most of people who are in the US will find that what you went through in England many years ago, we are still going through here in the US. So as if there is a coordination between these Western powers to erase Palestine, or maybe the Zionist movement is very active in erasing us, if you want to comment about that. But there is a quote in the early chapters of your book that caught my attention. I would like to read it and to see if this is why you started this parallel life. You're an engineer, but there is another part to who you are, and I think this is the legacy of who you are more than maybe than engineering. And if you may allow me to read this paragraph. This is in the early chapters. I think it's chapter 2, when Dr. Salman was a young boy, and he is surrounded by massacres happening here and there and raids to his area. He comes from a very large family, as you have read. And here is the quote. My life's mission became to try to put a face to this invisible enemy, in particular the Zionist soldiers who attacked and burned down my home. I wanted to find their names, photographs of them, their origins from all over the globe, and their military formations. I wanted to understand their hatred for us, their desire to make us refugees and destroy our country, Palestine. Is that burning desire to understand as a 13 years old, like, who are these people? They were almost, reading your book, they were almost invisible. You have not encountered them the way maybe the people in Jerusalem did, or the people of Haifa and the people of Akka maybe, and in Lid. So maybe that also answers your question why it was important to write your book, because not too many people from Gaza or near Gaza write about it.
Yes. Thank you for asking this question. As a child, I was in a boarding school in the year before 1948, and our headmaster came in April 1948 and said, the Jews are killing Palestinians in Deir Yassin. I can't protect you, go home. go home to your families. And so the distance between my boarding school in Beersheba town and Al Ma'in is about 40 kilometers. And two children my age were told the same. So we walked on foot for about 40 kilometers. And during that time, we were intercepted by Zionist patrols shooting at everybody. Anyway, I arrived at home, and a few days later, or maybe 1 week later, on 14th of May, 1948, precisely 14 May 1948, the Haganah attacked us in 24 armored vehicles at night. And we have about 15 young men with rifles. And of course, we could not withstand them except for briefly, but they destroyed everything. They destroyed, to me, very painful, the school which my father built in 1920. They destroyed our bayara and watermill, flour mill. They destroyed houses, they burnt houses, they killed everybody in sight. And so I was shocked because I never saw a Jew before. And I wondered who these people are. People, elders tell me they are, we call them vagabonds of the earth, شذاذ الآفاق, and they speak different languages. They don't all look the same. They came with arms under protection of Britain, and they want to destroy us, and they want to kill us. They want to take our home. As a child, I couldn't understand that. I've never seen them. I don't know how they look like at that time. And it really became my own personal task to know who they are and what their names are. I know Boberman, the German, Benny Matif, the Ukrainian, Zipper, the South African, and so on. After so many years of search. And so coming back to your point, when the West always ignored our pleas or story, the story started in 19th century when they said Palestine is a land without people, and of course we are a people without a land. So for some kind of logic, by the way, this logic was created by the Zionists on the one hand and people who do not like the Jews on the same time. And the idea here is that there is no harm done. We are looking for a country, and this country is empty. And over the years, I was wondering, how could they really say that? Because in the 19th century, there had been droves of travelers, Goren, the French, Van der Velde, the Dutch, the British survey, which lasted 4 years. So many came to chart the land of Palestine, the land of the Bible, and so on. So they knew. And I was really wondering why then they claim that it's a land without people. Because it came to my mind then, and even now, they want to make it a people without land. This is the germ of genocide. This is the germ of genocide created from the very beginning, that we want to make it a land without its people. In fact, in 1940, I found documents from Joseph Weitz, who ran the Jewish National Fund. He said, we will not leave one village in its place, not even one village. That's 1940. And of course, 1948, it was put in action. And let me just digress a little bit. In 1942, the Zionists held a conference and built more hotel in the United States, and attended by about 600 Zionist leaders in the world. And they said, we will build a Jewish Commonwealth in Palestine. They said that when the British were still in Palestine. And then in that year, they created something called village files. they created a Haganah intelligence service called Village Files. And the aim of that is to examine every village, the name of Al-Mukhtar, its friends, how much money they have, what wealth they have, the roads leading to this, what they plant, do they have guns, do they have training, how many young people are there. And this Village Files, I have 1,000 pages of that. This was a plan in 1942 to take over Palestine by killing them. I mean, there is no other way. And in 1945, the Second World War ended, and so Ben Gurion started to implement his plan to take over Palestine and get rid of the people. The only obstacle at that time, the British, although they were supporting them. So they wanted to get rid of the British so that they can have free hand, already they have a Haganah force, to take over Palestine and get rid of the Palestinians. So it started a terrorist campaign against who? Against the British. They hanged their soldiers and they kidnapped their judges, and they wanted to get rid of the British because they are the only force which may hinder their progress. The Palestinians by the 1939 was completely decimated by the British at the end of the revolt in 1936 to 39. So when Ben Gurion started the invasion of Palestine in 1948, he has nobody to oppose except few villages with few rifles and so on. And let me tell you one thing. It's very important. Every time Israel says, I have the right of self-defense, what does that mean? Not even now, I say even at that time. Right self-defense, if you attack people, do you have a right to self-defense? The right of self-defense is for people who are in the country, who are facing invasion from overseas. They came to us in smuggler ships in the middle of the night with guns and organization. They have an army of 120,000 trained soldiers in the Second World War in 9 divisions. In 9 divisions, they carried out 31 military operations. Now, I'll tell you about one of these operations, or some of them. In April 1948, the United Nations dropped the partition plan. And they said, it's not workable. And they said, let us bring the United Nations and give them trusteeship. Of course, Ben Gurion was mad at this. He wanted to take over Palestine. So he started the war against Palestinians in April 1948, before any Arab soldier entered Palestine and before the British left Palestine. They attacked at that time 220 villages and 11 cities in the coastal area. Jaffa, Haifa, Tiberias, Safad. They attacked Palestine, and by this time, they have depopulated half of all the refugees. So when the Palestinians sought some kind of help from Arab countries, it came in the middle of May. It was too little and too late. So the question remains even today, who is in a state of self-defense? We were the state of defense, self-defense. And the occupier and the attacker does not have self-defense. So let me just briefly say, the idea that Palestine is a land without people is really a recipe, a justification to do the genocide which we see today in Gaza. They started by thinking that expelling Palestinians, most of them, and leaving a few as a token, because there is a partition plan, they took 80% of Palestine, and there were only about 160,000 Palestinians allowed to remain. Ben Gurion deliberately wanted that. So he said, now we have a partition Palestine and we agree with that. But in fact, they regretted that the people who remained in Palestine to be citizens that. Benny Morris, who was a Zionist historian, said Ben Gurion was wrong. And if you hear, for example, the analysis of Mearsheimer, the American professor of he says that the ethnic cleansing, if it doesn't work, what does mean ethnic cleansing? That we take your land and throw you away, right? But if we throw you away and you're still finding us, we go after you wherever you are. We go after you in 1956 in Gaza. We go after you in Sabra and Shatila. We have to continue to get rid of you. Ethnic cleansing is not enough. You have to go one step further. And now this step further is what we see today, genocide. Because they say these people will not go away. We have to get rid of them completely out of this. So commenting on your earlier point, yes, it is the same story. It is the same story. And if we don't realize that in the West, well, I don't know what will convince you. I'm heartened by the young people around the world in the universities who really saw that. But they saw that at the price of 110,000 people killed and injured. It took that much to do that. It took the ICC and ICJ to make half judgment. And even today, all this killing, all this butchery, all this is not enough to convince the Western countries which created Israel that they have committed a basic crime and it's time now to repent. But the people who survive, like most Palestinians around the world, will never give up. This is the fact which should be remembered.
Yes. Let me just announce to all the people attending, if you have any questions for Dr. Salman, please send them to the chat. Put them in the chat area to the right of your screen, and Dr. Leila Huneidi will be coordinating the Q&A part. So please, if you have any questions for time issues, put them at the chat, and Dr. Leila, she will be addressing them. Dr. Salman, when did you start to realize in your journey, and you have lived in so many different countries and visited so many different countries, and you had several experiences with the Palestinian leadership, and then with the Oslo Accord and all that, you elaborate about it in the book. When did you realize that you can actually go back to Al-Ma'in? Sadly, in your book, you have in the last chapter and in the chapters of your life, if you cannot make it alive, inshallah, يعني Allah يعطيك الصحة والعمر والعافية, and I'm wishing him long years and blessings. But you said, the least you can do is really to be buried, even if it's a mile away, and maybe your grandchildren will carry you to the resting place next to your father. But when was it that you realized that actually, maybe I can actually go back? And those who live in Lebanon, and those who live in Florida, and those who live in Gaza, they actually can go back, because this is where you started really your amazing work of really mapping Palestine and creating this fascinating atlas that I am hoping that you will be talking about.
Let's go back one step and say 1944, there were Arab countries and people in this area for, well, as I said, once again, longer than any European country. with documentation. So in 1948, most of the people in that country have been removed. 85% of the people who lived in what became Israel become refugees. And how did they become refugees? Under the British, the Jewish community owned 6% of Palestine. And by the end of the war in 1948, if you call it war, Israel got 80%. Now, from 6% owned under the collusion of the British to 80%, how did they get it? There is not a single legal foundation for that. No resolution, no agreement. And they got it only by force of arms. And what happened to people? They were dispersed here and there. Could that historically be a reasonable resolution? Doesn't make sense. You don't have to be Palestinian. If you are a student of sociology or of strategy, you could say easily that this situation could not last. You only hold it by force of arms and terror and killing. And you can do that. You can imagine that you have a pyramid, and this pyramid is like that. You can turn it upside down and have the base on the top and the apex at the bottom. You cannot hold it for long. You only hold it because you have strong hands. If your hands are weak, then the pyramid naturally falls on its natural position with the base at the bottom. So these artificial situations, even today, are propped up by external forces, by the weakness on one side and on our side, by the strength of the other side. So it is never a doubt in my mind that this situation could not last. That's number one. Now, how do we go back? We know that we have international resolutions. We have never stopped resistance. And Al-Fidaiyin 1950, then Palestinian resistance in 1964 up to 75 and so on. And people resisted all the time. Now we should go one step further. Now we have the Palestinian feelings of home, which is fundamental. We have so many international resolutions. Then we can say, what next? What next? As an engineer, as a planner, I said, well, all the documentation I have, I should put it into action. There are two elements in any situation, the land and the people. And of course, they're bound to the land. So about the land, we have to know where the land is, what its boundaries, and so on. We left it, we did not have kushans, most of us did not have, but we need to know our property, the limitation of ownership, where it is, how many villages, and so on. So you need to create a geography, right? And in this geography, I tried to get maps from everywhere, not only from England, from Germany. I had aerial photos from 1917, from Istanbul, and basically from United States and the United Nations, all the documentation, 1948 war, and Library of Congress, and so on. So we accumulated data about the land. What about the people? The people who are refugees. UNRWA keeps record of the majority of refugees. 85%, 95% of rural refugees are registered with UNRWA, but only 70% of city people are registered with UNRWA. So we created that record, we supplemented it with extra knowledge so that we build a structure of Palestine. In 1945, the British produced something called Village Statistics, which has complete data about Palestinian cities and villages. We can always upgrade that to up to year 2022, which we have done. So now we have the land and we have the people. Next question, who is taking their land? All right, we have delved into statistics by Israel Statistical Bureau, and we created a picture of who lives in every village land. Of course, they are done separately. They are kibbutz and big cities and so on. And we also charted when they came to Palestine in our land. The first group is Ashkenazis in 1940, 1948 and before that. In 1950 to 1960, Arab Jews, and then in 1967, European came. In 1990, Russians came. So we tried to outline even the origin of every Palestinian location, the origin of settlers in every location. So we build that picture. And then by geography and so on, in 1984, very early on, I found something very unusual, and I said, something wrong here, something wrong. But then over the years, we developed that. Now it's all in computer. We found that 247 village lands are empty today. And another 240 or thereabouts have very few Jews today. Wow, my goodness, where are the Jews living? They are listed in the statistical abstracts of Israel in 924 settlements. There are 924, almost 1,000 settlements listed in Israel as being places where Jews live. But this is entirely misleading, because they only live in 5% of that, only 5%. Actually, 87% of Jews live only in 6,000, in 12% of area of Israel, which is 4,000 to 6,000 kilometers out of 20,500. Why is that? Very simple. First of all, they hardly exceeded the area they lived in during the British Mandate, which is located in 3 places. And now in my plan, I call them cantons. We expect Jews to live in 3 cantons. Canton, which is Tel Aviv Canton, and the other one, Haifa Canton, and West Jerusalem Canton. And then how come this huge area is empty? It's not empty 100% because they planted kibbutz in that. The kibbutz, they are intended to prevent the return of refugees. They are planted like nails in the land so that they say it's populated. But basically, it's run by the army. The army has factories there, they have training fields, they have this and that and that. And people who travel there, and I did some traveling sometimes, you actually find nobody when you drive in very few places. So we did an exercise, which I have presented if any one of you was in Philadelphia in Palestine rights. We tried to see the people who live in the southern district. We find they are almost only 150,000. And this is smaller than a refugee camp in Gaza. And these people who live in the southern district, 12,000 square kilometers, is the land of 247 villages who are now crammed in refugee camps in Gaza. The people in Gaza are the real hostages. They are held in the refugee camps there under fire, under blockade, and they come from 247. We have math to show that. So that we said, what would happen if these refugees return? That will take only 45 minutes trip. And the distance between Gaza and Al-Khalil in the West Bank is only 30 kilometers. You can go and reach it in a bicycle. And we said, okay, now with this number of settlers in the southern district, 120,000, could they maybe willingly go to Tel Aviv and live there and make the southern district free for its people? We arranged that into buses. And we found that in 9 trips, you can transport those people from the southern district to Tel Aviv area, if they wish to do so. And then the southern district will be free for 2.5 million Palestinians to return.
Yeah.
So from a logistic point of view, it is there. Now, everybody would say this is imaginary. No, it is not imaginary, because you cannot implement a solution unless you know, if you have the power to implement it, that it is practical to carry out, and it is practical.
Yeah. Dr. Salman, I think this was the most shocking thing I have read in the book about the empty spaces, and you have an elaborate plan, maybe mentioned more on the website. But let me take this opportunity to introduce my co-host, if I may say, Dr. Leila Huneidi, who is herself an author. She wrote the book Once Upon a Homeland, and she's an expert on anything that has to do with Palestine and the Middle East. And what Dr. Leila is going to do now, Dr. Salman, is actually, she went through a lot of questions that people have, and there are many, and Leila will do that. So please, Dr. Salman, because we have about an hour and maybe 7 minutes, we want really to squeeze all these questions of the people are posing. They're very important. Some of them really related to your work, but some of it is related to what is going on. So please, give us not short answers, but to cover as much as possible. And Leila, please go ahead. It's your field now.
We'll try. Thank you, Leila. Where is Leila? Here is Leila.
Dr. Leila, unmute your mic, please.
It was so interesting listening to you, Dr. Abu-Sitta. And now let's have everybody benefit from this very short period of time. So the questions about the ICJ and what your prediction about that, if there is any possible outcome. And I'm going to relate also the questions about the UN Resolution 194 about the return of the Palestinian refugees. If you have any anticipation for this, become like a dream, become real or become true. We can also talk about, bring up to the pool here of these resolutions. What is your anticipation of the solution for the problem, for the conflict that is going on, 1 state versus 2 states? What do you think? What do you have to say to people who still believe in the 2-state solution versus the people who would say, well, we gave enough chances to our enemy to get or delve into peace, that when he called for peace, we were there. The difference that we were very honest approaching peace while they were not honest at all. And they played the game that went over 13 years with negotiations that ended, that were basically good for nothing. We just wasted time. So what do you have to tell these people about those resolutions and about the ICJ and the 1 or versus 2 state solution?
Thank you, Leila. Thank you. there are 3 points. One is Resolution 194. Resolution 194 says that refugees should be allowed to return. Now, let me say this. The Resolution 194 has been repeated by the United Nations so far 130 times. It is now elevated to the level of what's called customary law. In other words, it's a law. And it makes sense because when it came in 11 December 1948, it did not create a new legal rule. It simply implemented the existing rule, which was passed by the United Nations one day earlier. On the 10th of December, one day before, the United Nations passed Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that includes everybody must be allowed to return home and to leave it actually if they want. So Resolution 194, number one, did not create a new fact. It simply affirmed it. Secondly, it has been affirmed all this time until now. It has not been dropped. And let us remember what 194 says. 194 is made up of 3 elements. First element, it says that refugees willing to go back, they should be allowed to go back, which is fine. Second one is that they should get relief until they go back. And I'll come back to this point. Third point is there should be a mechanism to arrange for the return.
Yeah.
The third one is called UNCCP, United Nations Conciliation Commission of Palestine, which is still available, it's still active, still in the United Nations. Its job is to organize, to create a mechanism for the return of the refugees. Let's go back to point 2. They created what became UNRWA to do that.
Yeah.
The refugees should be given relief. Now, Israel at first welcomed that for many, many years. Why? Because under international law, it will be responsible for the burden of looking after the refugees. If you create international law, if you create a problem, you have to solve it. If you create refugees, you have to feed them, to house them until they go back. And Israel did not want to do that. Who came to their help? The United States, basically, and European countries. They said, we must take care of refugees. They will cause problems, and Israel will not be established comfortably. So the United States paid most of the budget of UNRWA at that time, not because they love Palestinians, because they want to relieve Israel from the responsibility and burden that. They continued to do that until recently. As you know very clearly how they are attacking UNRWA. Why? Because UNRWA is the only operative element of the 3 of Resolution 194. So that would not happen easily because luckily UNRWA is responsible before the General Assembly of the United Nations. It's not responsible for Security Council. And in the General Assembly, we have a majority of 150 or 160 out of 193, which means United Nations General Assembly will never drop UNRWA. They will twist their arm another way. They will cut the funds. And they urge European countries to cut the funds, which is really a crime against humanity. When you starve people, it's a crime against humanity. So this is the situation. We stick with UNRWA, number one, because it's doing an important job, and it is a reflection of the situation we live when UNRWA is accused to be a terrorist organization. It means the United Nations, all of it, is terrorist organization. This is unbelievable. Now, the second point is ICJ, International Court of Justice. As you well know, this is a court which takes states to task, not individuals. In other words, states are guilty or not guilty, while ICC deals with individuals who committed war crimes. ICJ, sorry, they deal with states. Now, they already, thanks to South Africa, they already said there's a plausible genocide in Gaza. That's just a technical term. If you say plausible, then the genocide. I mean, genocide cannot be pieces. In genocide, either there is genocide or not. We can see that very clearly. Now, how important this is? It's only important if the states who are required by the charter of ICG to take action against the states which violates international law, right? So that of the 190 states, so those of them who are members of ICJ, if they take action against Israel, then they can do that. How they can do that? In many ways. No trade between them, not allow people to have any connection with them, no travel, no flights over their lands. They can do a lot of things which are peaceful. They don't have to carry guns. They just say, you are a pariah, you are a criminal, I don't want to deal with you. Now, how far they can do that, I'm not sure, because the United States will probably punish them some other way. But to take the example of South Africa, a small country which has been so much pain by apartheid, they know what apartheid means. And Desmond Tutu said, our apartheid is nothing compared to the apartheid in Palestine. So if one small country can do that, I'm sure other countries can do. And therefore, in this world we are, in which information is circulated every minute, Israel cannot remain immune from the responsibility of its crimes. And those who support it, they may have a question. I have a discussion with some scholars, American scholars, on a question is, how valuable is Israel to the West? Is it now valuable like before? Or is it a liability? And what price the West pays to support Israeli crimes? How much? So that's another issue which is broiling. I'm sure it will have ramifications in the near future. The last question I have is one state or two states? Let me tell you one thing. Two-state solution is a farce. It is a trick. It is a trick in order to show the hungry people there is a morsel waiting for you. What does it mean? Where is this? Where is the limit of the two states? Under what conditions? And Israel itself has no boundaries, has no borders. It never declared it has borders. And the armistice line, which is now bounding them with West Bank and Gaza, has no legal value. Article 2 of the armistice agreement says very clearly the armistice line has no legal value. It doesn't defer or offer any sovereignty to any party. So what do you mean by that? To me, the answer is very clear. Anyone who is expelled from his home is allowed to return to his home. And then when they return, and with them, any people who would like to live with them peacefully, that's fine. And then the human rights principle supersedes everything else. The human rights says you live in your home in peace. Then you decide what kind of government you want to have. You want to make it communist? You want to make it monarchy? You want to make it Islamic? It's up to you, but only after the human rights application is completed, that people go back and live in their home. And I am sure you know this as well. Many people I know, I mean, Jewish scholars and so on, they are against the Israeli policies. to the extent that there are groups which say Jews for right of return, as you know. So this is the natural thing. And if I were a Jew, I would follow that, because in the long run, the Israeli policy has a dead end. You cannot keep killing people and occupying them only because you have a force. The force has limited life. And therefore, the long-term solution should only come from application of human rights.
Mhm. So, Dr. Salman, I believe all the questions that come up also about the current war and what is happening. So, what you're saying, that the secret lies in mechanism, it lies in the implementation and the tools of implementation, rather than just laws and resolutions and talk in the air, like we're seeing how Netanyahu is trying to buy time and keep the war taking, its course, because politically he is the only beneficiary from that. So the people are asking about, what do you think after Gaza, after 8 months? What is the solution? What's gonna happen? How this war is gonna be settled?
Well,
Anything
yeah.
what how Netanyahu is facing the wall, and actually playing games on everybody. He has endless tricks.
Of course, I don't know the final answer. There are possibilities. We don't know which one will prevail. But let me tell you one thing, taking advantage of my age, all the Israeli policies, I call them tricks, are the same since 1948.
Right.
The tricks about truce, the tricks about temporary agreements, the negotiations, endless negotiations about arriving to an agreement, then breaking it immediately. All this is standard. I mean, there is a long record of that. In 1948, for example, when they have signed with Egypt agreement in 24th of February 1949 about the armistice line, and they, after 1 year, they said to Egypt, look, there are so many Palestinians crossing the line and going back home. Let us create a buffer zone. And the Egyptian created a buffer zone. They created a line called modus vivendi, which would be a temporary line. But in that, they chopped off 200 square kilometers of Gaza Strip. It was 550. So that the procedure which Israel follows is the same. Now, the question is, everything has a life. I would imagine two things. One thing, Palestinians, after more than 200 days, they have not surrendered. They are still alive, and of course they are killed daily, but they have not vanished, and I don't think they will vanish. Imagine one thing: you have at least 16,000 orphans, orphans who lost one parent. What are they going to do when they are 20? Are they going to sit still? Are they not going to fight Israel? I mean, so what I mean is, the solution will never be forcing people to submit. The solution will only be a stable solution based on rights. What I cannot understand is that how much Israel is going to fight the world and present itself into a favorable light, and how much the Palestinians could continue to resist. But I have a simple number. In my time, when I became a refugee, by the way, I became a refugee on the day Ben Gurion declared his state, on 14th of May. We were 1.4 million people. Now we are more than 10 times that. We are 15 million people. Half of them live on the soil of Palestine, of course, under Israeli rule. And the other half is within 100 kilometers around Israel. So would you think that 15 people would just disappear and they claim to be coming from the moon? And they have, there is no way that this situation will be. So we are still trying to reach some kind of equilibrium, but I think it is near enough. I think it is near enough.
Yeah. There's a question about the archives and about how Great Britain tries to prevent researchers in particular to have access to the archives that are in the government, the hold of the British government since 1948, and all what was recorded about the Nakba. So do you think this is the case in Great Britain right now, or there are, you know, some rumors about that issue?
Britain has a lot of records. As I mentioned earlier, the records are found in several places, not one.
Mm.
But let us not forget that there are other very valuable records elsewhere. Germany and France has, but of course, the United Nations have very good records of the atrocities which are committed in 1948. I have a file done by United Nations Truth Observers, and they list a large number of massacres committed in 1948. Our figures in the Atlas counts 90, but also the Library of Congress has important papers about Palestine, which says in March 1948, establishing the state of Israel is very bad for the United States because it's going to be a communist state, which will be communist with allegiance to Russia, because most of the people come from Russia. And their situation has been overturned by Truman. Truman has a friend who is Zionist, and there are stories about how this came about. He changed his mind last minute, and he recognized Israel 5 minutes before it was announced. So if you look at the records, and there is now a group of young Americans looking at this, you would be surprised how much the American State Department record was dead against establishing the state of Israel. And we can learn a lot from that. But to me, being a practical person, I hope that the West should ask a question: how much Israel is valuable to us? We created it in very unusual circumstances to be our base in the Middle East. Did it do that job? What's the price of doing that job? Let me come back to something you all know. You know Balfour. Balfour, 2nd of November 1917, issued a declaration to establish a national home for the Jews in Palestine. A home, not a state, in Palestine, not of Palestine. Why did he do that? Balfour is anti-Semite. In 1905, he created a law not allowing the Jews to come to England. It's called the Aliens Act. And he does not want them. And therefore, the question is what to do with them. Okay, let's have them, put them in Palestine. First of all, get rid of them. Secondly, let them work for us to protect the Suez Canal. And this situation of kind of politics, you know, that you convert a problem into an advantage. By the way, it strikes me that Germany now is very much pro-Israel and against Palestine. You will be surprised. How come Germany is like that? It's the same principle. We don't want them, and therefore they have to be strong elsewhere. And that's exactly what Balfour policy was. I don't want them in England, but we'll make them useful to us elsewhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah. Anyway, it was not the first promise, 1917, the Balfour Promise. Napoleon had done that before him. Giving the
Napoleon,
same, giving the same promise.
the Europeans, from the beginning, they did not want the Jews in Europe. Palmerston, in the second or third decade of the 19th century, he said they had another place to go to, and they created the idea that Palestine is a land without people. And
Yeah.
but let me say this. You remember in April 12 last, there was a big conference in, not very big conference, but big conference called Palestine Conference in Berlin.
Yeah.
The organizers are pro-Palestinians who are German, and including German Jews.
Yeah.
And I was due to speak, and I sent my recorded message. 2 minutes after I start my talk, 900 policemen entered the premises and pulled the power plug and so on. And you were surprised. Why should Germany, which is history, Second World War, be so much on supporting Israel? Yeah, I think there's some kind of explanation. Just like Balfour, we don't want them there, so let us make sure they are secure in another place, which is not our country, not Germany. But again and again, I hope anyone who's listening, who has also studied the subject, I would like to make a study how much Israel is valuable to the West now, not like before, but now. What are the pros and cons?
It's becoming a liability, as you said. It is becoming a big liability, actually, on the West.
Yes.
There is a question, Dr. Abu-Sitta, about the streets and the campuses and what happened on, the way, what do you think of changing the Western public opinion now is in that transitional, stage, especially with the younger generation. How can you, reflect on that?
This is a blessing which I never welcome. It's amazing how these young people have seen the light, and they spontaneously make these demonstrations at the expense of their studies. Amazing. And I'm really amazed on that. And I say that these young people have two advantages which Western politicians don't have. The first advantage is that they have clear conscience, and they have knowledge which they can use and put in their mind. The politicians, either they are ignorant or they are fed the wrong information. The second advantage these young people have, they have no money to be lost. The politicians are given bribe, benefits, all kinds of things. They are afraid to lose them. Now, you see, in my time, I would assure you, if we have 10% of the media we have today, maybe a Nakba will only involve not 530 villages and cities, but maybe 5 or 10. Nobody knew about us. Nobody even spoke English. And now everything happening is transmitted around the world. So the big curtain of deception and lies about us has been lifted. And these young people saw it. And not because of Western design. because of this device. This device, people everywhere have
Yeah.
their mobile, and they
Yeah.
can. This is a historical breakthrough.
Yeah.
Historical breakthrough. But now, I hope that this strong current of young people could last and could be transferred into politics. This may take 5 to 10 years because these people um, are not yet in positions of power.
Yes, exactly. Mhm.
And when they do, then they can make their convictions, turn them into practical laws and regulations.
Inshallah. Another question, Dr. Abu-Sitta, is about, it's anthropological, actually. It's about the ethnicities and what do you think of the Khazar, the Jews of the Khazar, and how do they relate to the 12 tribes of Israel? And what is the difference? It's a historical question about the ancient Jewish, 12 tribes of Israel and how they reached the land of Palestine and then are replaced nowadays during our time with the Khazars, who are from Eastern Europe and have nothing to do with the 12 tribes of Israel. And they're actually claiming that God promised them this land.
Yeah, you know, Naila, when I read about this over the years, I say, my goodness, these people are bankrupt. They have nothing else to show, except they say, my ancestors were there 2,000 years ago. And if that's true, is a problem. If it was not true, it's another problem. And then I say, as a Palestinian, well, all right, you have been there or not there, it's not my business. I did not leave. A Palestinian did not leave.
Right. Yeah.
You claim your ancestors were there, if they have any right, and they left, but I did not leave.
Since
That's number one.
more than
Number
2,000 years before history
leave.
and 2,000 years after
right.
history. So I stayed on this land for more than 4,000 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not leave. So
That's not counting the Canaanites. If we're going to count the Canaanites, it's a lot longer than that even.
yes. So that is if that story is true. If it is true, good for you. I mean, I did not leave. You cannot just come and take my place because I did not leave. Now,
Yeah.
if it is not true, of course, and let me say, it's the discussion about this is silly, because if someone is born in Japan or whatever and say that my grandmother gave me a piece of paper that's saying that your home is this, and I mean, it just shows the bankruptcy of that. But
Yeah.
Al-Khazar is a Turkic country north of Turkey and Western Russia, and they were not Jews, except in the 9th century. They adopted Judaism because their king at the time placed taxes on people if they became Jews, and he adopted Judaism. It is true. A story says that he asked a Christian priest and a Muslim imam, and anyway, he decided to adopt Judaism. And anyone who adopted Judaism at the time, he was free from taxes. So they built that. And the problem is not with us. Problem is with the Russians and the pogroms who did not want them because, because of lots of stories. So in short, this story is a sign to me of the bankruptcy of the argument. If it is true, it's false, no value. If it's not true, it's also false. I mean, so,
I mean, there's a lot of comments here about the Khazars and the Germans, and people are still, bringing the subject up and saying that this is what we're having nowadays. Actually, the ethnic type of analysis that are taking place, like who has the right, and then the belief in the divine, I have students who basically, some of them are Jewish students, and they're against this type of argument, whose comment is always, which God gave you that promise? Like,
Yes.
which God gave you that
Yes,
promise?
yes,
Tell
yes.
me, tell me about the God that gave you the promise. So
Yes, which God? That's a good question. Good
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Leila, let me tell you something. You remember the late Uri Avnery?
yeah,
Yeah, I remember. All right.
yes.
He in 1948 he was a terrorist from the Irgun.
Yes.
Irgun. After some time, he softened a little bit, and he became a peace uh, messenger of some kind. I knew him, and we met a number of times, and we had
Oh.
lots of correspondence.
Yeah.
And we met in Paris. We had a debate, and we corresponded. Our correspondence was published in Mondowise a number of times. Anyway, I asked him one time, Uri, we were in Paris at the time, if my house is next to your house and you have a legal house in let's say Jaffa, and I have a house next to you, would you agree that I return back to my home there? He said, no. I said, no. I said, you are call yourself a messenger of peace.
Yeah.
How come you don't want me to return to my apartment, which is next to yours?
Yeah.
And he said, well, we have been fighting Nazis and so on. I
Mhm.
told him, if you really came to Palestine running away from Nazis, you are a coward, because you should fight the Nazis who really attacked you. Why should you go to another country you have never seen before, and people who have done you no harm, and you attack them? You
Yeah.
are a coward. You should have been fighting the people who treated you this way. Why? What kind of logic? You go overseas and attack people who you have never seen in your life. He said, well, there is some kind of merit to that, but history. And I
Yeah.
say this to most people, European, Germanic Jews. Why don't you fight the people who did that to you? Why do you go kill people, other people? Yeah, this is cowardice.
Yes. Yes. People are bringing anti-Semitism to the chat room. So any insight about that? Anti-Semitism.
I don't know how long this trick will stick. I don't know. I mean, what is the meaning of anti-Semitism? What is the meaning of how do you apply it? IHRA is pushed forward to say that anti-Semitism means that an Israeli is allowed to take a Palestinian home and live in it, and Palestinians should remain a refugee. I mean, anti-Semitism, I am against treating badly anybody, not only Jews. You should not treat badly Indians, blacks, any community. Why should it be? The rule should be you should not mistreat any other community, not your own.
Yeah.
And that does not give you a license to kill other people. I'm glad that the difference between Zionism and communism, sorry, anti-Semitism, is very clear to many Jews, which I respect. Let me mention one of them I have contact with, Peter Bernard, for example. And there are a lot of people, increasing number of people, who were afraid to speak, by the way. Jews were afraid to speak. Now they have more courage to speak. And they say, I am against occupation, apartheid, and genocide, and regardless who's doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the origin of Arabs is the same. I mean, this is our origin. So how are we against ourselves at the same time? So making this or raising it up to a crime in the US right now, that you are anti-Semitic if you are saying anything that has to bash Zionism and equalize it, becomes so equal to Zionism, has become actually a big problem to many people who speak out, and many speakers and even lecturers in classrooms. So this is, a trick, another trick that is used, and another tool that is used to just shush everybody up and have them get scared from those laws and those punishments. And we
Yes,
have
yes,
all these examples on all the campuses and what happened, in Columbia and other campuses all over the state nationally. So unfortunately, if you're in part of academia, you have to be very careful, and thank God that this generation is a lot more exposed than previous generations now, and they have the gut to stand up and speak up. And regardless, it's religion here is put in a room and no one talks about religion. Everybody's talking about human rights, where we see regimes and governments are stepping on and trying to violate by any means and not bringing it up, while the whole subject is a human right issue. It's a big part of this subject is human right. Where are the human rights? How
yes,
we are a democracy and then
yeah,
stepping on human rights to that extent.
yes, yes. You are, nobody is allowed to mistreat anybody else because who they are.
Yeah,
What you should do, apply rule of law if you
yeah,
commit a crime.
yeah,
And the crime is very well established. Now,
yeah,
nobody is immune from punishment for crimes they committed. And
yeah,
also, nobody should be punished for something they have not done.
yeah, yeah. It's, just because the comments here are coming up that Judaism is not Zionism and Zionism is not Judaism. For sure, they're two different things. Judaism, nobody has a problem with Judaism. The whole problem is in Zionism. So it's a political decree where actually there are endeavors of making it associated with religion in order to gain more authority and have it spread, among the new generations. But thank God for the new generations again. It's
Yes.
yeah,
The young generation has taught us something. Their conscience is clear, blank sheet, clear. They are not tarnished. And I ask anyone, do you condone anybody killing other people and taking their home? And they
yeah,
say, no. And then say, how do you explain that 78% of the no 72% of 72% of 78% of Israel is obtained by killing people. How do you explain that 530,000 villages have been depopulated? How do you explain that the Haganah committed 90 massacres in 1948 and
yeah,
many other? How do you explain that? I mean, I just want to know, how do you explain that? If I speak to the kibbutz, for example, you heard the news that kibbutz Narim and Ner Oz,
yeah,
and which some of them have been taking hostages in Gaza. Now, do you know that Narim and Ner Oz are in my land, in my father's land, in Al
wow,
Ma'in land,
yeah,
and they are living there because I became a refugee.
yes,
Narim is where I was born. So
yeah,
how can I justify me and my family be refugees in Gaza at a density of population 8,000 people per square kilometer, and these settlers at a density of only 5 persons per square kilometer in my land, and I'm a refugee, and they are in my land? How could you explain that? Could anyone with any sense of intelligence and decency explain that or justify it? Justify it?
Yeah. 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 Dr. Abu-Sitta, somebody is asking about your opinion about the representation of PLO and the unity of Palestinians. What do you think, especially after Gaza war? Now we're ending actually the 8 months and seeing all the solidarity now with, with like one voice. There's one voice right now. So what do you think about the PLO and where it falls from all that?
It's a big, big, big problem. And
Yeah.
I, with many others, are involved in agitating about that since Oslo, actually, since
Yeah.
Oslo. You see, we are now, politically speaking, in the worst situation in the 76 years. Worst situation. Because at the moment, the people who say they represent us are not elected. And I was member of the Palestine National Council until Oslo when I resigned. There has not been any elections from that day till today. And who represent Palestinians? Leftovers from before. They refuse to make new elections. We have made many representation. We created many conferences. We say we need representation. Let me tell you one simple fact which explains that. Half of the Palestinians, 6 or 7 million of them, are born after Oslo. They are young people like the people you see in the campuses. They have no voice, and they have 60, 70 years to live, and they have to decide their future.
Yeah.
And therefore, the biggest weakness we have as Palestinians, and I'm sure this will change, that we should have elected representative of the Palestine National Council. Without that, it will be a big problem, because when they ram solutions down our throats now because of situation, the people who should stand up yes or no for that are the newly elected young people.
Yeah, yeah. But this is actually the problem all over the world. Now we're seeing old schoolers are trying to hold on their positions,
Yes.
and they're not allowing any new blood to get in. And this
Yes.
is the dilemma that we're living everywhere. We're living it here. We're living it even on campus.
Yes.
Professors
Yes.
who sign 10 years contracts with the institution, they basically they're just hugging their position. They're not allowing any new blood to come in or to get
Yes.
in.
Except that in these countries, they have secure countries and they live in their countries. So their
Right.
problem is to change the leaders.
Yeah.
Now we're fighting to create our country.
Exactly. Exactly.
And this will come, I have no doubt about that. 15 million people, many
Yeah.
of them, you know, in America and Europe, are very brilliant people, and they will not let it go.
Inshallah. Doctor, I think Muna Sadek has a question. She wants to ask a question. Muna?
Where is Muna?
Muna?
Yeah, hi,
We
hi
have-
everyone.
we
Actually,
have 2 Munas
no,
here
I
today.
mean, thank you so
Munas.
much, Dr. Salman. It's wonderful discussion, and we enjoyed each minute. And I'm very thankful for Samar and Layla for moderating this conversation. They almost covered so many aspects. And thanks for all of you who participated here. If anybody has any question, you still have. We still have another let's say 5 more minutes, and I believe, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me say to the people who are listening to us, Muna is a refugee from a lovely village in Galilee called Deir el-Qasi. We know everybody where they come from. We know, have data about their property and their lineage and their kaza. So Deir el-Qasi produced many brilliant people in engineering, in finance, in business, and in a good friend of mine, Abdul Karim Sadr. He is one of the top most economic consultants to the third world countries. He has given advice about economics of almost every country in the third world and even more. And I could count many people, all Sadiq family.
Thank
So
you so much.
we don't forget them.
Yeah, thank you so much. I believe, I mean, all of these small villages which were destroyed, you know, back then, they produce a very talented, very, you know, prominent people. And Dr. Salman, your valuable research and, you know, books, it adds a wealth to our, you know, to our people. We are so happy. We are so happy that we read your book. And I feel like 1 month, thank you, Mona Jarrah. She recommended the book. You know, she is on the top of the book club committee for APWA, for American Palestinian Women. And I mean, this book, it's very valuable. I think 1 month was not enough, to be honest. 1 month wasn't enough to cover and read this book. So maybe we will go back to it in the future. Definitely, we will encourage our young generation. This is the most important, to get our young generation read it. It's valuable.
Sorry, Layla, could I
Let
see
me just
Hassan.
just a second, Hassan.
Hassan is raising his finger.
Just a second, please. I know that we have all agreed that we're going to be giving the questions through the chat, but Muna and Layla, please allow me, because we don't get this chance very often, but Hassan Hamami is also a witness to the Nakba. He was probably 15 years old, just like Dr. Salman, when everything happened. So Hassan, you have like 2 minutes, and allow me, ladies, that I gave him that privilege because I think he and Dr. Salman have so many things in common. Hassan, you have like 2-3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Salman. Like you, I'm in a continuous period of learning and speaking and convincing, and really, I have a lot of regard for what you say.
Can I ask you what religion, please? Can I ask you what
I'm
religion?
from Jaffa. I am a Yafawi. I'm 91 years old. And
he's an engineer also.
No, what, sorry, what original village?
Jaffa.
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 Yafawi.
Which quarter, Abu Kbir or Jabali?
Jabaliya.
Jabaliya. Okay, very good.
We were half a mile away from Beit Yam, and Beit Yam was the nearest colony next to us. It was called a colony. It had a 5-story building, which was built as a beer brewery, but the walls facing Jaffa were all reinforced walls, and they had no windows. They had slits in them, for which they used to fire at us. I was 15 years old. I'd been doing first aid, which is what I did with a group of students from 2 other schools, Al-Amiriya, the Orthodox, and the Christian Brothers, the Fair School. And I continue to learn. I learn from you, and I thank you for everything that you share. You continue to be a brilliant light. Thank you.
Thank you.
Al-Amiriya is the school of late, very well-known Professor Ibrahim Abu Lughod. That was his school.
Yes, indeed, he was. And the person who was leading our group to learn first aid was a guy who you probably know, who was the PLO representative in Lebanon. And he was, I have to scratch my head.
Shafiq al-Hout? Shafiq al-Hout?
No, yes, al-Hout. Shafiq
al-Hout, yeah.
Shafiq al-Hout, yes. Thank you. And I continue to be in touch with his wife, with his widow.
Bayan al-Hout.
Exactly.
We live
our collective knowledge has to continue to pass because it's so valuable. Beside what's written, it's the collective knowledge that's important, and it's important to continue to share.
Thank you, Hassan. Dr. Salman, by the way, Hassan is also an engineer like you. Maybe you can get together after this Zoom. But Dr. Salman, we are nearing the end of this amazing talk. It's not enough to listen to you in 2 hours, we need more. But as we speak, I'm looking at my phone because on WhatsApp, I have a group of young people who are, as we speak, they are 90% non-Arabs, non-Muslims, Americans in Florida. And as we speak, they are coordinating a mini demonstration that they're going to do in Fort Myers. And they are checking, because it's so hot here, if somebody can bring a tent. So for these people, because we are taping this and this is going to be sent out, and for all these young people, I want you to talk about a very particular thing that you are doing, which is an architecture competition. And if they go to the website, there are things that high schoolers and children and young people can do, not necessarily Americans, but maybe the diaspora. Could you address that so we can end with it, and also mention the website where people can go and either buy the atlas or see really the very diligent, delicate, important work that you are doing?
Thank you very much for this question. I would like people to know about it. When we develop this data, then we have to put it into use. What better than putting plans for the reconstruction of destroyed Palestinian villages? So 8 years ago, I started in London a competition among young Palestinian architects who are in the graduation year of architecture. And instead of having graduation project, something else, we gave them data about Palestinian villages. They can select one of them. We give this data, aerial photos, description of people, and so on. An 11-part report, and we told them, now you have to redesign the destroyed village with the new population and, of course, with internet and all that. And now we are in the 8th year. So far, 270 young Palestinian architects entered the competition. We have produced complete construction details for 60 villages, divided into areas, mountain area, coastal area, and arid area, and so on. And we are going on with that. And there is a British and international jury who select the best 3 designs. And every year, we meet in London in September to see the year's application. Every year, we have about from 40 to 60 submissions. And the British architects, the jury, tell me they are amazed how these young people can imagine and reproduce the village on the same location for the same people in a modern way. And then 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we said, well, this should not remain undercover. We should make it known to the people of the village themselves. So we asked the winners to speak by Zoom to refugees from the village they designed. And we found these in Lebanon and in Jordan. And through Zoom, these young people explained their design for the village. It's amazing, a human experience, unbelievable. The old people said, where is the madafa? Where is the guest house of the village? Where did you put this? Where is the bakery? Where this? And so on. Amazing. And the young people answered them. The young people, refugees in the camps, they said, but we need sports club. Where is the sports club? We need internet center. So yes, we have that for you. You will see it. That's why I want you, please, to say to people who are interested to go to our website. There is one video about that. This is very interesting for people who see either the human side of things or also the practicality of the designs. That's one thing. And I just conclude by saying we have produced many atlases and maps. First of all, Atlas of Palestine, 1917 to 1966, has 700 pages. It has 50,000 Palestinian names, and it's produced in English and in Arabic. Now we have it in Spanish, and we have it in Russian. We have also Atlas of Palestine, 1871 to 1877, which is Palestine before any Zionist colony built in Palestine, purely Arab Palestine. This is published in 2020, and it has special relevance to London. We presented this in the Palestine Exploration Fund headquarters, which did the original survey. There are also postal maps about Palestine in a postal map from 1948, 1960, 80, until now, and the last one is 2021. We also had a map about Beersheba because Beersheba, the British left without dividing the land between people like village land. So we have that. And all this is in our website. And people can actually buy copies. There are distributors in United States and in England. And if you have any problem, just send us an email.
Okay, we were about to end, but I think there is also George.
Yeah.
George
Yes.
wants, please
I
go
would
ahead,
like
George,
to say
introduce
that
yourself.
I am not 91, but I am 94.
Mashallah.
And I am a refugee from Jerusalem, from the new city of Jerusalem, Upper Baqa. And I have been about 18 years old at that time. And now I'm living in Switzerland. I have been activist for Palestine for a long, long time, for many years, in the BDS, PASO, that is Basel, region of Basel, and the olive oil campaign, for example, and so on. And I have published a limited edition, my life story, how I was born in Jerusalem and how I lived in Jerusalem until the age of 18. And then what happened later on, my book is titled Struggle for Survival, a Palestinian refugee in the diaspora tells his story. I have it in English and in German. And I don't have any more, I have only very few left in English, but I have enough for anybody to order it if you wish to in German. So this is where, and I wish to ask Dr. Abu-Sitta if I am allowed to contact him. I got from Jesse an email address, and I wish to contact you and discuss with you certain facts, and especially about the anti-Semitism. Who are the Semites actually? Are we not? We are the Semites. We are the original people of the Middle East. And my mother is originally from Yemen, and my father from Aleppo, and I am a Palestinian.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're ending Zoom in a minute or so. Please, we will provide with Dr. Salman's permission email for those who want to continue the conversation with Dr. Salman, especially the people who have witnessed the Nakba. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Salman, for taking the time and spending this valuable time with us. He is the author of Mapping My Return, a Palestinian memoir. Dr. Salman also has a wonderful project that we could spend days talking about it. Thank you, APWA, and thank you, Mona Jarrah, Mona Sadiq, and thank you, my co-host, Leila Huneidi. Thank you
Thanks
all of
so
you
much.
for attending and for staying with us the 2 hours. I really thank you, Dr. Salman, and I apologize if somebody wanted to talk and we were not able to do so. You can Google Dr. Salman's name and you will find ways to contact him. Thank you so much, Dr. Salman, and inshallah, one day you will be able to visit Al Ma'in on your feet with your grandchildren.
Thank you very
Inshallah.
much. Thank you very much for being patient to hear me so long. Thank you very much for inviting me. And
Thanks
George,
to
please don't
you.
fail to contact me. The number is there. Thank you very much.